Right, as I promised, I have citations from the ADL's own PDF full of research and information on political extremism in the United States. Now, I'm going to get into exactly how this is super dishonest. I'm going to show you some of the quotations from this stuff here, proving from their own information, from their own cited work, that they don't count left-wing extremism in the same way as they count supposed right-wing extremism. So let's go ahead and look at this. A white supremacist who commits a non-ideological killing may still possibly be identified as such by his or her tattoos, or perhaps a gang association previously documented by law enforcement. So, it is still counted as white supremacy and right-wing violence when there is no ideology espoused, as long as there is a tattoo or a previous gang affiliation associated with it. Now, breaking apart that logic, the stupidity of that is that if you took anyone from the Bloods or the Crips or any other black supremacist gang or any other gang in general, most black violent offenders are going to be people who have voted Democrat in the past, or who have endorsed Democrats, or who have voted Democrat. Most of the time. Why do I say that? Because the large majority of the black community in America votes Democrat, as well as the large majority of liberal white women, and a large majority of Hispanics and other ethnicities, right? The only group that consistently votes more towards conservative outlets in large numbers happens to be white men. Everyone else has a disproportionate alliance towards the Democrat Party. So if you took any gang violence from any black guy and counted that as left-wing extremism, as they do here with white supremacists, and count it towards right-wing extremism, then the Democrat Party in and of itself, just due to gang violence, would take the cake in terms of political extremism. But they don't do that because they have a double standard. But if the person who committed that non-ideological murder was instead an Islamist extremist or a member of the militia group, it may be possible this fact will not be noticed or documented. In other words, some extremist movements may be underrepresented in this data when it comes to non-ideological killings. This is a quote that comes almost directly after the one that I first initially provided. That is a damning piece of evidence because it shows that the ADL is aware that the research gone into documenting this information is faulty and is politically biased against right-wingers, against the conservative right-wing parties in America. It is always going to favor the left wing in terms of being more peaceful because it's not counting actual left-wing extremism towards left-wing violence. It's not counting it. It just isn't. One such event, which is actually the most blatant evidence of any political extremist activity, comes from the summer of quote-unquote love in 2016 when a guy saw someone with a Trump hat on and said, "Hey, we got a Trump supporter over here!" And he ran over to him and he went bang bang into the guy's head, killing the Trump supporter. That's not considered political extremism by these outlets that are creating and crafting and compiling these pieces of information and the statistics regarding extremism on the left and the right. It's not counted. It's not counted. That's ridiculous. Now, here's this one. I found this one very interesting. This is actually a story. It says, in August, Matthew Taylor Coleman, confessedly motivated by QAnon and Illuminati conspiracy theories, took his two infant children from California to Mexico and murdered them there, believing his wife had passed serpent DNA to them. The next month in Maryland, Jeffrey Allen Burnham killed his own brother, his brother's wife, and a third person because Burnham reportedly believed his brother, a pharmacist, was involved in a government plot to poison people with COVID-19 vaccines. Prior to the coronavirus, the anti-vaccine movement in the United States did not have a particular ideological leaning and contained both left-leaning and right-leaning activists. However, the politicization of the coronavirus and other factors have created many new anti-vaccine conspiracy adherents and given the anti-vaccine movement a distinctly right-wing tone it did not previously have. I'm sorry. Wasn't Kamala Harris and the entire Democrat Party railing against the use of the vaccine prior to them winning the election in 2020? So we've got that happening, which, in case you don't remember, I'm pretty sure coronavirus came around sometime, in late 2018 into 2019. It was there for a while. 2020, we had the massive crackdowns. People weren't allowed to go outside of their house. So yeah, there was still massive political divide. Now, you'll see from CNN, from these mainstream media outlets, people saying that the vaccine deniers are strictly conservative, but that's definitely not the case. A large quantity and a large portion of the Democrat leftist party still denied the use of the vaccine, specifically because it was created, crafted, and done under the administration of their opponent, Donald Trump. Now, this person right here, the guy, Taylor Coleman and Jeffrey Allen Burnham, absolutely crazy. Condemn that action and terrible behavior entirely. It is despicable, it's disgusting, killing children is evil. Now, why is it that abortion isn't considered left-wing extremism? Because the main proponents of abortion, which kills millions of children a year, is leftists. So if you're going to count the killing of children by these two individuals as right-wing extremism, then you should count left-wing extremism in terms of the billions of kids that have been killed because of abortion. But they're not going to do that either, will they? One of the most striking features of white supremacist murders is the large proportion of non-ideological killings to ideological killings. Over the past 10 years, only 86 of the 244 white supremacist killings were ideological murders. So, they are overrepresenting specific and detailed reasons as to why it is these people are committing these crimes. And they're also associating white supremacy with right-wing extremism, right-wing beliefs. Now, here's something.
I've got a secret for something that's going to happen in just a few minutes. Once I get to the end of this list of quotations, you're going to see something quite shocking. Because everyone believes white supremacy is this right-wing thing. Oh my goodness, right-wingers, white supremacy, it's like peanut butter and jelly that goes together perfectly. No, it doesn't. But I'll show you that in just a second. Over the past 10 years, only 86 of the 244 white supremacist killings, 35% were ideological murders. So, less than half, 15%, right? So we have 35% of actual specific ideologically motivated killings. Now, they don't tell us what the ideology is, but I think we can all assume that it was because of the fact that it was a white supremacist murder, that it has something to do with believing that the white person happens to be better than the other non-white people, which I condemn, right? Everyone is made in the image of God. That's the most basic Christian belief. Every single human being is made in the image of God. Now, when you say 35% of ideological murders, the remainder were group-related but not ideological attacks, were related to traditional criminal activities, or were murders for which no clear motive can be determined, and yet 244 were counted as right-wing extremism. 86 had ideological purposes and reasons behind them. The other, non-existent ideological movements and motives. So you have 86, 35% of these reported 244 murders over the last 10 years had actual ideological motive. The rest, not at all. So they're overrepresenting it and claiming it to be white supremacist and right-wing extremism. As mentioned above, non-ideological killings are almost certainly underrepresented for other types of extremism. So, let me read that again. As mentioned above, non-ideological killings are almost certainly underrepresented for other types of extremism. But leaving that aside, there are aspects of white supremacist movement that likely make non-ideological killings more common. Starting with the fact that violence is often considered acceptable or even approved form of resolving conflict within white supremacist subculture. But not with the massive amounts of Democrat voting black gang violence? The massive amounts of people running around and killing people just because of the fact that they have a Trump hat on? The massive amounts of ideologically motivated gangs of roving black criminal gangs going and beating up innocent white people just standing on the side of the road? That's not considered non-ideologically, but specifically accepted in the black community? Because I'll tell you this, that's one of the most common things you'll see in terms of violent behavior. And because of the fact that the vast majority of black people in the black community happen to vote Democrat, shouldn't that also be counted as left-wing extremism if you're gonna count right-wing extremism just because of the fact that someone happens to have the acceptable tolerance of violence in the white supremacist groups? Yes! So the absolute nonsense of not counting the non-ideological leftist murders, but counting right-wing murders that are non-ideologically motivated as extremism is massively hypocritical and is massively it's just a diversion. It's a complete and total diversion away from what is actually evident in terms of crime statistics and in terms of reality. Non-ideological killings by white supremacists take many forms. 12, for example, occurred during home invasions. But a few statistics stand out. First, of the 158 such murders, fully 27 or 17% were group-related murders. White supremacists killed members of their own groups. So a white supremacist kills another white supremacist, and that's still counted as right-wing extremism and white supremacist violence. That's stupid. Now do gang violence in black communities. They won't. They don't. They don't. Because they have broken rules or because they were involved in disputes or rivalries. They also occasionally killed members of other rival groups. Almost as many murders, 24 or 15%, were incidents of domestic violence. So someone beating and killing their wife and children is counted as right-wing extremism and white supremacy violence. But the same happening on the other side in black Democrat voting gangs doesn't happen, doesn't occur in regards to the counting of political extremist violence. But there were also murders of male housemates and one murder of a female Klan member and her son or the woman's husband, a Klan group leader. White supremacists have attitudes towards women that range from traditionalist or patriarchal and all the way to the outright misogyny common among alt-right adherents. The same thing happens in the black community that vote Democrat. Wow, so now you have to have that argumentation towards Democrats. Oh my goodness gracious. It's quite possible that white supremacist views of women may have played a role in some or many of these deadly incidents, but they won't count that in terms of left-wing extremism when a black person does something to their family and a black person does something to someone else's family in the black community because they vote Democrat and they don't want to count Democrat plain and simple violence and death as something that's actually left-wing extremism that's accepted, tolerated, and even encouraged in the left wing. They're only going to count it as non-ideological but still racially and politically motivated murders if it happens to be someone with a white supremacist gang affiliation or tattoo, and that makes them an evil piece of sack of garbage. Wow, oh my goodness gracious, what amazing research these people put into this nonsense. Denver, Colorado, Lyndon McCloy went on multi-location shooting spree, killing 5 people and wounding a police officer, who nevertheless was able to kill McCloy and end the spree. Harbored revenge fantasies against most of the victims. McCloy was involved in the toxic masculinity subculture in the manosphere, specifically as an advocate of hypermasculinity, claiming that alpha and sigma males should be the only males allowed to lead others to procreate, while beta males and women should hold lower places and be differential. He self-published a long 3-volume novel that expounded upon these views and detailed his revenge fantasies. Hey, guess what? That's actually one of the main proponents in regards to how they engage in hypnotizing people into transgender activism. I bet you didn't know that, but that's actually something called humiliation porn. It happens all the time on the left in order to encourage people who might not have so much success with the ladies into thinking that maybe they are one. That's a real freaking thing. If you don't buy it, look up the definition of sissy hypno, which is actually something that Michael Knowles covered on his channel a few years ago. It is porn that is specifically decided and derived and made to slowly but surely change the brain chemistry in a person's thought process as to making them not think that they're actually attracted to women, but they're attracted to being women, making it so that alpha males get to come in and rail them. That is a main proponent of the transgender movement. That should be considered left-wing extremism. But I guess not, because it happens to be coming from someone who they counted as right-wing simply because he's a part of the manosphere, when in reality the transgender movement is playing off of the manosphere to make their moves. So, manosphere and that sort of nonsense should be considered left-wing simply because of the fact that it is associated with humiliation porn, which is a designed tool to help people in regards to being manipulated to think that they're actually trannies. Lufkin, Texas. Jason Hare Newman, a member of the Aryan Circle, a white supremacist prison gang, was arrested for the murder of William Wade Pierce. Newman allegedly shot Pierce, then transported the body to a remote location. Police have not yet offered a motive. So there is no motive associated with that one, but that's counted as right-wing extremism. Not the guy, by the way. Not the guy who literally said, we got a Trump supporter here, and went over and shot him twice. That's not considered left-wing extremism, but someone who has no motive associated with his violence and his murder is considered right-wing. That is absolutely retarded. Absolutely retarded. And you can tell it's complete nonsense. Now, I told you I had a nice little secret for the end of the video, and here it is. I bet you didn't know this because they don't want to tell you, but Mr. White Supremacist leader Richard Spencer endorsed the Democrat candidate during the presidential elections for the last 3 elections. Not only just the Democrat candidate, mind you, but the entire daggum Democrat ticket across the 2024 presidential election. The entire ticket. So let's see. They counted the last 244 murders by white supremacist hands as right-wing extremism over the last 10 years. But let's take a look back, shall we? It's been about 8 to 10 years, and each of those years was endorsed by the white supremacist movement towards the Democrat Party. So you have an endorsement towards the left wing from the white supremacist movement leader Richard Spencer, and it's still being considered right-wing extremism. So the evidence is completely stacked against the left, and all they do is go back to their stupid, nonsensical rhetoric to claim that what they're saying is that right-wingers are the ones who committed the most violence, completely negating actual left-wing extremism, leaving out black-on-black violence and gang violence, which, if they counted that, and they counted it in the same way they do with supposed right-wing extremism, would result in a massive shift of probably thousands of deaths in left-wing extremism, as opposed to the overrepresented and completely non-factual so-called 444 deaths of right-wing extremism, along with the fact that white supremacists have endorsed Democrats. Not to mention, white supremacy finds its origins in the Democrat Party anyways, but they're not ready to admit that because that would require them to understand that history is actually in favor of conservatism. That the Democrat Party has always been segregationist. The Democrat Party has always been white supremacist. They just happen to have a different tactic of doing it now. What utter nonsense. The ADL is lying to you. Anyone who says that right-wingers are committing more extremist violence and committing more extremist deaths is not paying attention to the actual reality of the world they're living in. Don't believe me? You can actually go to Newsweek and you can go to scmp.com and you can see the white supremacist Richard Spencer, leader of the white supremacy groups in America, endorsing Democrat candidates. They've done it for the last 3 years. Not last 3 years, the last 3 elections. Yeah. By the way, the last 3 elections, that goes back to the first time that Trump was running. Hillary Clinton got endorsed by a white supremacist. The left is the party of violence. And without lies, the left dies. Anyways, that's going to do it for the video today. I hope you have a great day and a great rest of the week.